Now in this part we're going to start to look at the difference between object mode and edit mode, and what are those two things. Up until this point we only worked in object mode, and you can see up here that we are currently in object mode. We also have a bunch of other modes here, but we're going to look at edit mode, since those are primarily the two modes that you will be working with most of the time, at least while modeling. But before we jump into edit mode, I just want to take a moment and look at some other brief good to know things. Like for instance, the A key will help us to select and deselect objects. Now you might notice that you have to double click in order to deselect, and if that is the case and you don't want to do that and instead just want to click and click again to deselect, you can go to edit mode and preferences, and under key map here we have select all toggles, and if this is checked it will toggle instead of having to double click A to deselect. And you can also deselect with Alt and A. Now I notice that my screencast keys ain't turned on, so I'll just go here and start this and go back to view. Now if we would like to add additional objects, we currently just have this cube, and don't forget the lamp or the camera here. But let's add another cube, for instance, or some other object just for fun. So you could go to this add menu here, and we have all kinds of different objects. These are all categories of objects, and the most common kind of object is a mesh object, which contains geometry, like our cube here, for instance. Let's go ahead and add, for instance, a UV sphere. Oops, and it became added inside our cube, so I'll just hit G and X to move that in the X direction. And you can say that we have this cube here, or sorry, this sphere here. All the objects that we add will be added at the location of the 3D cursor. And to move it, we can hold Shift and right click onto a surface of an object to have it kind of placed onto that surface. And we can also click somewhere out in space here to have it placed somewhere else in the 3D world. Let's see if we can add an object to this location. So just go to add mesh, and this time we can let's go with the monkey here. This is Suzanne, and she's kind of the mascot of Blender, if you will. Now we know about toggling between selecting everything and deselecting everything, as well as just clicking, and we can hold Shift to select multiple objects, even different kinds of objects. But let's go into edit mode now and see if we can manipulate some portion of an object. So let's go with Suzanne here, and I'll just hit tab to go into edit mode. I'll just hit tab again to toggle out object mode, and let's go back in, and we can see that since everything is orange here, it's all selected. So I'll just hit A to deselect that. You can use exactly the same shortcut keys as you do in object mode for manipulations, selections, and just about anything that relates to both modes. Now in edit mode we have three different kind of elements that we can manipulate. The first one being the face, which we are currently in now. We are in face select, and you might not see all of these little dots here in your version of Blender, and that's because I turned that feature on. So if you go up to overlay here, you can click this and you get this quite long and confusing piece of user interface. And if we check here mesh edit mode, you can see that I have center here selected, and that is what toggles all of those dots. So if you want to see a slightly clearer view of where your faces are, and it also becomes quite easy to just click on to the dots in order to select any given face, and hold Shift to just add to your selections. Now if you happen to click this here, you can see that all of the overlays disappear. So keep that in mind if you happen to just accidentally click on this overlay here and you're missing your axis views, for instance, and the grid. Okay, so let's roll back a bit. We are currently in face selection, and up here we have 3 different kinds of selection. So let's click this next one, which is edge selection. And now we can go in and select different edges here. Just like this. We can hold Shift to add to our selection. We can hit A to select and deselect everything. And now let's go and check out this point or vertex selection. I think it should be called, or is called, one vertex and multiple vertices. I think that's the correct terminology anyway. Now we already know that we can, for instance, hit G to grab, and we can do the same in both object mode and edit mode. So we can grab multiple vertices here and just start moving them and click to confirm. And we can really start to mess up poor Suzanne here, just moving and doing random manipulations just to get a feel for it. We can also let's go to face select and select some of these faces, and we can scale this in and out. Also notice that as I scale this, there's no actual constraint on how far we can scale, so we might accidentally, or we will probably just scale through mesh sometimes, and that is sometimes desirable and sometimes not. Just keep in mind that sometimes duplicate geometry can be quite hard to spot, but we'll go into and talk about how we can solve that once we get further down the road. For now, we're just beginning to scratch the surface on what is possible. You'll probably not want to go up here to change between the different selections mode all the time. So instead of doing that, you can hit the number 1, number 2 and number 3 on your number row, not on the numpad, but on the number row, to switch between these selections. So 1 is vertices, the 2 is edges, and number 3 is for faces. We can also add objects inside edit mode, but if we do, that new geometry that we add will be added as part of that existing object. So it will be kind of be the same object, but it will be 2 separate meshes. So let's try that. I'll just hold Shift and right click to move the 3D cursor to some point and go up to the add menu, and you can see that in edit mode it looks a bit different. That is because now we only have access to the actual mesh objects, as opposed to in object mode where we have access to all kinds of different type of objects like lamps and cameras and curves, and yeah, there are quite a few different objects. But now we only have access to the actual mesh object primitives. Let's go with the tourist here, for instance. And you can see that this now got added to our scene. We can start manipulating this as well by just grabbing faces at random and just moving them around. And you can see that we can still add or manipulate the Suzanne monkey here, but we cannot, for instance, select and manipulate face on the sphere because it's part of another object. If you look at the outliner, you can also see that we have a Suzanne here, a sphere and a cube, but we don't have this torus as an object. That is because it's not its own object. It's just one more piece of geometry within the same object of the Suzanne here. Let's tab out to object mode once again and just demonstrate that a bit more. You can see that If I select the cube is selected, but if I select either the Suzanne or the torus, both of them will be selected since they are the same object. Now, since version 2.8 of Blender, we can hold shift and select multiple objects here. Well, you could do that in previous versions as well, but now we can also tab into edit mode for multiple objects. So even if they are different objects, we can edit them at the same time if they're selected in object mode as we move into edit mode, and that can sometimes be quite convenient. I think this is enough for this lesson. I'll just tab out to object mode here and we'll continue in the next part. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe and check out our newsletter if you're into that. Thank you.